There's footage of the Just Stop Oil guys at Les Mis stopping a show. There was no violence or anything. They stood there was some booing, and then they were escorted off, and the show was cancelled. That used to be a pretty standard protest for Just Stop Oil. What did you make of it now you're sort of no longer in the tent?
Well, it's a shame the show was cancelled, right? I think that's a harsh outcome. Mostly sporting events have been disrupted for a few minutes here and there. You know, Wimbledon was a few minutes. Premier League football game, I think, was the first sporting event that they disrupted. I think it's a shame. Overall, though, my position is that no amount of protest now, no amount of disruption, further disruption, will change the course of this government. They made it very clear when it comes to drilling in the North Sea, they're not going to stop. They're going to do more. So they're threatening now to issue hundreds of licenses, not just a handful. And I think actually this government will welcome more disruption because it feeds the new culture war narrative that they're running against the green agenda and that kind of stuff. And so I think it's actually counterproductive now to have further protest and further disruption because it can't help the cause. We can't stop oil through protest now. I think the government have made that clear. And I think the only way we can stop oil now is through the ballot box.
And explain that. So do you want to use your money to get Labour elected? Is it as straightforward as that?
Well, I think our electoral system means that only one of two parties can win, right? We all know that. And I think we have to look at the policies of the two parties and see who's best for the environment. Who will stop oil? Who will do more oil? But it's not just about oil. It's the whole green agenda, because the answer to our cost of living crisis lies in the green economy. The campaign itself is called Just Vote 24, and our first focus is on the age group 18 to 24, people for whom voting will be the most difficult that it's ever been in our country due to changes in legislation from this Tory government. Only 1% of that age group votes Conservative, by the way, which kind of makes it fairly obvious why they've been targeted with these restrictions on voting. That's the first focus of our campaign, to help those people register, get their ID, and be able to vote, and motivate them to vote, to motivate them that they can make a difference. And the second half of the campaign really is to talk to the wider population about the benefits of the green economy, to dispel the myths, the untruths actually that Rishi Sunak and his government are telling about the green economy, that we can't afford it, we have to slow down, that kind of stuff.
Is this a sign of you being more pragmatic? That there's a certain idealism in protest where you basically say, the world is going to the dogs for these reasons, and we're going to protest it. Actually, presumably, you must accept Labour aren't going to be perfect when it comes to the green economy. They started out 2 years ago saying we're going to spend 28 billion quid a year. That's got watered down. Politics is very much a process of ideals being compromised by pragmatism. Yeah. Are you happy with that? Do you accept that you're not perfect as the enemy of the good here?
It is, isn't it? And I am happy with that. That's an expression I use quite often. We mustn't let perfect be the enemy of good, or even better. In this case, good or better. I mean, what we will get with the Labour government will be far better on the environment, on the green economy, than what we've seen from the Conservative government for 13 years. But what we know that we'll get now, Rishi Sunak has made his position very clear. He's anti-green. He's anti the green agenda. And
he would say he's not. He would say he's pro net zero. He's pro taking on the challenges, but there's not. It's in short-term methods of getting there. He has a disagreement with you. But he would say he believes in net zero 2050.
Yeah, I mean, he says a lot of things, but they aren't true. For example, he said pushing back the ban on the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 5 years was about saving motorists money, about saving hard-pressed families who are suffering from the cost of living crisis, about saving them money. But the Climate Change Committee have made clear that 5-year delay will cost an extra 10 billion in fuel costs. So it didn't save anybody any money. And actually, if you're hard-pressed by the cost of living, you aren't running around looking to buy a new car. So it doesn't affect somebody that's struggling with food bills, for example, this deadline of 2030 or 2035. And, he claims drilling in the North Sea will lower our energy bills, but he knows that's not true, because no amount of fossil fuels made here can do that, because we allow global markets to set the price of fossil fuels. So half of our gas comes from the North Sea, and at the peak of the energy crisis, we pay 10 times more for it than normal, because global markets set the price. So it doesn't matter how much more gas we make here, we can't lower our energy bills while we're dependent on fossil fuels. And of course, it can't give us energy security because it runs out.
Labour says they're going to honour the new oil and gas licences. They're not going to revoke them. Is that a good example of you swallowing something, saying you'd like them to revoke them, but you're happy if you'll put up with it if they don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Also, I think I understand why Keir Starmer has said that. we've seen the damage that was caused by the cancellation of HS2 last week. Hundreds of millions of pounds in compensation that we'll have to pay as a nation, and the loss of confidence in our government and in our country for investors, either internal or external investors, who can't have faith in our government. The pushing back of the sale of electric petrol and diesel cars by 5 years, that knocked the confidence of the motor industry as well. When governments basically do these U-turns, break their word, that kind of stuff, that's a bad thing. So when Keir Starmer says, I'm not going to break contracts that have been issued by this government, I understand that. I think that's a proper thing to do.
Would you, if you were advising him directly in his ear, would you want him to do something radical? Would you not want, there's that thing that came out of the Tory party conference, it wasn't true, the idea of Labour taxing meat. But we've had William Hague on this programme, who is not he's not a crazy socialist. And he said at one point on this programme, you're going to have to start looking at things that change behaviour. It's the hardest political thing to do. And I wonder whether Labour and the Tories are both in the same boat when actually they won't ever do anything radical. You might think they're better than the Tories, but they're still not going to be radical, are they?
Well, I don't know. Right, I'm hoping to hear some powerful things this week. Rachel Reeves is speaking today, Keir Starmer tomorrow. I'm hoping that we'll hear more. But there's still a big difference between what the Conservatives are doing and have done on the environment, like banning onshore wind and onshore solar. There's new talk this week of making it even harder to build solar projects. In the face of an energy crisis, it just doesn't make any sense. The problem, the really big problem with the Conservatives is they're playing politics with this issue. They're creating a divisive issue where there shouldn't be one. We should be coming together because the answer to all of our problems, our economic problems, are to move to a green economy. We get, for example, twice as many jobs and twice as much GDP growth for every pound we spend on green energy versus fossil fuels. It doesn't make sense to invest any more money in fossil fuels, but the Conservatives are using this as a political tool for the coming election, and that's really harmful for our country. And so there's a really big difference between the two. Labour don't have to be radical to be radically better than the Conservatives.